Welcome to Glitch Cube. We're a gaming podcast, and each week we take a deeper look into the art of video games. I'm Christian.
I'm Chris.
And welcome back, you guys. It's nice to talk to you once again. Before we get into today's topic, which is a very interesting one, well, I say that about all of them, but I genuinely do think that. We're going to hop right into that weekly update. So why don't you tell us what's going on with you? What's on your brain? What's on your radar this week, Chris?
So nothing really new. Honestly, I'm still plugging away at Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I think I'm near the end, thankfully. I'm like in the last two regions, so hopefully I can beat that this weekend. So
Nice.
aside from that, I was thinking of talking about maybe some games that are coming out, or when this episode comes out, some of these have already come out. So I was kind of looking at maybe titles that I've either seen before or I've heard before, because there's always a couple games coming out that you never heard about and they don't look that good.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna talk about every game that comes out, but some of the ones that stood out to me are Little Nightmares 2.
Oh yeah, that looks awesome.
It's release date's on the 11th, and I forgot that I pre-ordered it a long time ago from the Bandai website, and this edition that it comes in, it's like a retro TV box. So when you open the box, it looks like a little TV and standee. So I'm actually kind of excited about it.
That's interesting. Because did you play the first one?
No, I did not.
You pre-ordered the second.
I have it. I just haven't played it. But I knew I would like those games. Like I like the aesthetic a lot.
No, they're great. They're creepy as hell.
Yeah, they seem like it.
Mm-hmm.
Game that looks really interesting. I haven't done too much research on. I think it's kind of like a dialogue story game. I'm not sure. I just honestly I know it by the art because it looks freaking awesome. Death Crown.
I've never heard of that one.
It looks really cool. Like I love like the black and white art style, like drawing style. It looks cool. I think I'm gonna definitely try and check that out soon. Just because I'm a sucker for art, like kind of like that.
Same.
For all you people out there that are cultured, new Galgun game out there.
Oh, nice.
If any of you don't know what that is, you're basically a boy in a school and you're shooting your pheromone arrows at the ladies. I can't believe there's been this many games of it released, but there's obviously a lot of cultured people out there. So
yeah, there's obviously a market for that.
Exactly. There's a market for everything now, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's scary but interesting. I guess if you have an idea that's obscure, it doesn't hurt to just put it out there and see what happens.
Hey, someone's making thousands off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can sense the disappointment.
On a little more lighthearted news, Super Mario World 3D or Super Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
That's coming out. Well, came out on the 12th. I skipped out on the Wii U, right? I only got a Wii U recently, and I modded it so I have like everything on the hard drive, and that was one of the games I put on there, and it always looked really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't touched it. The Mario as a cat seems like an interesting gimmick.
It's my favorite gimmick.
Oh my god! I've heard a lot of people say that the 3D World is actually really good, and makes me curious to try it out. So I think that's one I definitely one day might pick up. I hate Nintendo games never really go on sale, so it's kind of hard for me to wait.
That is annoying. It's hard because trying to pay $60 for a game that came out a couple years ago, it's a daunting thing. And when you're trying to like play on a budget, that makes it even harder. So
it's like, look at Splatoon 2. It's like maybe Black Friday it'll maybe go down to like $25-$30, and that game's like a launch title. Like,
yeah,
Nintendo, what are you doing?
Come on, like we get it. People are gonna buy it because it's Nintendo, but help us out. Come on.
Like, I want to play Luigi's Mansion 3. I want to play I want to get the Mario the anniversary thing because
Yeah.
they're gonna stop selling it next month. So
Oh, really?
yeah, that's the gimmick of it. On Mario's date, I think it's like March 23rd or something,
Oh,
21st.
Mario Day. It's March 10th.
Oh, it's March 10th. Oh my
Get
god.
it? Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mario. Yeah. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I'm dumb. So yeah, that'll be ending, and I'm a sucker. I never played Mario Sunshine, so I'm like, I kind of want to play it.
Oh,
Never
I
played
love
Galaxy
Sunshine.
either, so
Galaxy's great too. All those games are great. It's just hard to justify paying $60 for those still.
that's what it is. I'm like, dude, I own Galaxy. I just don't like hooking up my Wii, and I have Mario 6. I beat Mario 64, so it's like I would just be
Mhm.
getting it for Sunshine, and them not really upscaling it correctly either is like making me kind of like I don't really need this. I'd rather wait for hopefully a Zelda anniversary
Wind
pack
Waker,
this year.
please.
Dude, if it's Wind Waker, Skyward Sword, and Twilight Princess, I'd be kind of happy because I never beat Twilight Princess nor
Same.
Skyward Sword, so
Mhm.
I'd be really interested in playing it.
Twilight always catches my eye, but it's one of those I've never actually beat as well. So
I love the look of it. Like
yeah,
it's got that Ocarina of Time darkness to it that's just mm.
yeah, it's too good. It's too good.
I mean, even if they re-release the Game Boy titles like Oracle of Seasons and Ages, oh my god, those are still to this day. I think those are my favorite Zelda games.
Hmm.
I love Wind Waker. I love all of them that I've played, but something about the Oracle games, it's just I love the gimmick of it. Like it was just so good, and I don't know. I
Yeah,
hunger for more games like that.
yeah, agreed.
Uh, Wrapping it up, something I'm actually kind of really interested in. 30XX. If I recall, that's the sequel to 20XX, which
Hmm.
is a Mega Man inspired roguelite.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
And there was one time I was at a friend's house and we stayed up probably 10 at night till about, oh God, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning. And we just played it all the way through.
Yeah.
And we beat it. And it was cool. And I really loved like that gimmick of like a Mega Man game, but like permadeath, and there's
Mhm.
obviously progression and stuff, which made it fun. And it was cool that it was 2-player. So I'm really interested in seeing what they do with the sequel because I haven't been following anything on it. So that's another one I got to check out. Uh, Another indie classic, I think you say Anodyne.
Don't know.
The sequel was coming out. The original game was cool because it literally looked like original Zelda, and I think that's why people in the indie community really liked it at first because it looked like classic Zelda.
Hmm.
This one is more of a 3D kind of world, so I'm kind of I don't know. I'd rather want that vintage Zelda look to it.
Yeah, there's something to it, right?
One that looks really interesting. I didn't know about it until I was looking at this list, and now I kind of want to do more research on it. King of Seas. It's an action RPG, and you're a pirate. And from what I've seen, it basically looks like you sailing around. And at
Mhm.
first, I thought it was just like a ship combat game, but it actually looks like you can get off your ship too
Oh,
and
cool.
explore. So it looks beautiful. A little indie game. I think that's definitely one I'll have to check out. That comes out on the 17th.
Nice.
Same with the last 2 games. And then finally, right before the episode is released, Persona 5 Strikers comes out.
Yep.
I regretfully still haven't beat Persona 5, but I've played most of it and I enjoyed it. But I don't know, these like kind of Warriors games and Mushu games, like I love Dynasty Warriors growing up
Yeah.
a lot. Like
Yeah.
I played them a lot, and I would make it where everyone I know around me would die, and I would just take on the whole army, which was fun.
Yeah.
But I feel like because I did that for so long, these games, I don't know. Hyrule Warriors is really cool because you can unlock so much stuff. But aside from that, I don't know if I can really get into these kind of games anymore.
I don't know if that's like a long-term game to play, but it's definitely would be fun to play for like, I don't know, like a couple hours here and there.
Yeah, it's like a
But
good goof off kind of game, I guess.
yeah, like turn your brain off and play for a little bit. Yeah.
Aside from that, that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else. There's
Nice.
been some interesting games posted on Game Pass if any of you do that, but other than that, I think that does it for the weekly update.
Nice. Yeah, so I gotta jump in and add at least one more game to that because it's been one that I've been looking at for so long, and
Uh-oh.
it's finally getting like some sort of buzz where the initial release might be in July finally, but
July.
yep, Little Devil Inside. That game looks
Little Devils.
fantastic, and every time I see trailers of it, I just lose it a little bit. And talk about art style, it's gorgeous, and like the gameplay looks fantastic. It's yeah, they're finally setting up a release date for it, and I've been watching this game for I don't know, like 4 years now, like little teaser trailers here and there, and yeah,
Oh, I remember you showed me a
mm-hmm,
trailer of this before, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cute." And there was
yeah,
like nothing else on it. And I'm like,
no,
this is one of those games that's probably just gonna die."
yeah, but no, it's actually getting it has a release, and it's supposed to be for PS5, so
Damn.
yep, so they actually got picked up, and that's awesome. Yeah. So besides that, for that's just like my little game that I got really excited about this past week when it got announced. But for me, at least, I've been focusing primarily on art and drawing and all that. And I've been drawing so much lately, and it's actually a super liberating experience for me right now because there's times if, for artists it is tricky, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever fell into this. But there are a lot of times and moments in my life where I just stopped drawing completely and I was falling into that rut again where I, I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere with my art. I didn't feel like I can convey a clear message with what I was drawing. And I was
Hmm.
just drawing just to for the sake of just doing it. Now I'm drawing because it's bringing me joy and it's bringing me like happiness again. And I think that's whenever I'm trying to hold on to that as long as possible because I don't know when the next like period of my life is where I might go like a year where it's like, I'm not going to really draw anything. But what's really been helping me out with that and to get out of that rut are these little drawing challenges on Instagram. And, after doing the one Monstanuary for January, the one I made for myself to force myself to draw, hopping into this next one, the world building challenge set up by Matt Dye Draws on Instagram, it's been so much fun doing it. And the reach or the community reaching out and talking to me and like just getting excited with each post that I'm putting out, and then even having the creator of this art challenge talking to me on a daily basis now, where we're just messaging back and forth, is just super awesome, and it's just really exciting to be a part of that community and know that that there are other like-minded people out there that are also excited to see what you're making. And it's just really, I don't know, I love it. It's super fun and it's just been really helping me out a lot. Uh, go through some personal things for the last week, and it's definitely it's being very beneficial towards my mental well being right now. So yeah, it's been fun.
Well, art is very therapeutic.
Yes, that is very true. Very very true.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't know. I feel like watching you do your art since like even when I first met you to now, it's like I feel like I've seen it kind of slowly like evolve. Like you
Hmm.
still have your style, but I feel like there's certain times where I see like I don't know, something it's weird to like it's as if it would like level up, you
Hmm.
know? Like I feel like there's like either more definition or something like that. Like I just notice like little things that make it look even better, you know?
Thank
I'm
you. That means
definitely
a lot.
enjoying it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That really does mean a lot to me. Okay, so for today's topic, we're going to be going into morality in games. Now, that's kind of a broad topic, and it's something that might be a little misconstrued in gaming itself. What does morality actually mean in gaming? And before we really jump into that and kind of give more examples on it, I wanted to kind of touch back on some what I would definitely consider, and we've talked about it, so what we would consider the stepping stones to the morality systems we see now in gaming. And I think the big one for that, the one that really started it and kickstarted everything, or a lot of things actually in gaming in general, is Dungeons and Dragons. And for this topic, I want to bring up the idea of alignment specifically. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, there's different alignments that you can choose from. They have your chaotic evil, your chaotic neutral, you just have good or chaotic good, right? The idea of chaotic just means heavy leaning in that
Yeah.
sense. So it's a lot of people can take the term chaotic and take it as like a bad thing, but it means like let's say someone's chaotic good. Now those two words don't feel like they should go together, right? Necessarily. But
Mm-hmm.
what that would mean is that you will do and you will perform actions that are solely good no matter what, even if it hurts someone else or it might hinder someone else's progress because you are chaotically good. Now, for chaotic evil characters, you are the exact opposite, where you will do things that are inherently bad despite the repercussions of your party members or other people around you. So that's kind of the idea of chaotic, where it's you go to the extremes. So the most commonly used alignment is chaotic neutral, because that means that you basically get to be you. You can just decide what you want to do in that situation. So with that system in place, I feel like that has really inspired a lot of other like gaming companies or just games and people and board games, just all kinds of things to kind of lean into this idea of alignment to try and bring out realism in gaming. And I think that's the ultimate goal of morale systems in
Mm-hmm.
games is to try and make them more human, to really impose the player on there and make it so that their decisions feel like they actually mean something.
Yeah, it's like I feel that when you play a game that has a moral system or the choice of being where you can either be really nice or really mean, it just adds to the story. Like even if the story is kind of boring or not that good, being able to kind of make a decision that could impact the story differently than what the story would be otherwise. I don't know, I always liked it. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's kind of I think early 2000s is when we started really seeing that kind of moral impact
Hmm.
on games where it kind of changed the storylines to it. But when you look back at the alignment from D&D, I mean, you can kind of see that even in older games too, like have those choices. And I mean, like those choose your own adventure kind of text-based games had
Yeah.
it where you kind of, even though it's more plain, but you still were able to make a choice, and good or bad, you would still get feelings if, oh, I had to burn down this village for the greater good, or am I
Hmm.
justified? It's like they've always kind of been around in games, but I feel that over time developers started thinking like, oh, let's turn up the dial on some of these,
Hmm. The budgets got
which makes it
bigger. Yeah.
fun, but
Yeah. The budgets increased, so they're able to put more time into these idea systems. Because a lot of those original games that had the little bit more like choose your own adventure style to it, or the early games, it
mhm,
really was just like it could have been just two people making a game and publishing it. And it's people who were
yep.
self-taught coders just because they love gaming and they tore apart the code to figure out how to do it themselves. So now that we have entire teams behind it where you have people who their whole job is to create these decision trees. They don't have to worry about the development or the implementation of it into the game itself because that's another department's responsibility, right?
Mhm.
So we're starting to see some games that have real like you really do feel like you make an impact on the world that you're interacting with, even if that is like a deceptive thing where you're following a tree or a decision tree path in the long run, but it feels like you're actually making an impact.
Yeah. And going on that decision tree, it reminds me of coming back to choose your own adventure games and stuff. And I'm thinking more about modern terms, right? So a
Mm,
lot of like interactive fiction, like any of the Telltale games
yeah.
for the most part. I feel like the Walking Dead one had more of the choices that really mattered, because I've played quite a few of these games. I played the Batman, the Game of Thrones, the Borderlands, and I think the Walking Dead one actually had choices that felt like, ooh, like I was kind of mean with that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Games like that, or Detroit Become Human, or any of like the Quantic Dream kind of games. Like these games that feel like movies have it where these decisions are less about becoming this really good person or really evil person. It's more so like, here are your everyday responses. And like, you have your one good comment, your one bad
Mm-hmm.
comment, then you have the sarcastic comment.
Right.
And then there's the one where it's just like, what the fuck did you just say? And I noticed in that kind of time of games when I think this is technically after we had like Fable and Mass Effect
Mm-hmm.
doing like the big kind of like morality gauge, which we'll come back
Mm-hmm.
to. These games had it where on the dialogues, you would have 4 options, usually.
Right.
And I noticed this, like a lot of games that have a moral system will have multiple choices. And it's interesting because they all seem to follow the same formula with that. I mean, I never really noticed it until I think Dragon Age, I think Inquisition had it, where when you would hover over the choices, you would see an image, right? One would be like it was a blue symbol, and that was like the good Paragon question. Then there'd be red, like skull or flames, which was like the evil choice. And then there was a Joker mask for funny,
Mm-hmm.
which usually just was like a neutral response, but sometimes it would make them mad.
Right.
And then there was like here's the one that gives more of a backstory to these questions, but doesn't really answer what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like so many games started copying that to the point where that your choices really didn't feel like they mattered anymore too much.
Yeah,
Like,
because it felt like a rinse and repeat. Like I played this game before, right?
yeah. And I love playing games. Like, usually when these games had these systems, I would play them twice because I wanted to see the good and the bad choices. And when games started incorporating that like goofy choice, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be goofy, because usually it just meant you were an asshole.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I like this choice, you know. But over time, these games, they would create such big dialogue trees, they would lose a lot of the meat that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it felt like your choices really didn't matter. And I think over time, these games started losing that idea of the alignment.
Yeah.
That, you know, you're going on this gauge, and some of these choices, it's like, okay, like in my movie, one tick over, but it's not like I'm sticking to the same personification of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's weird. It's kind of hard to describe, but I feel like these games started giving you too many choices with it, and you just, I don't know. I felt like maybe just a lot of games didn't know how to pull it off. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And I think when the alignment started moving towards like the moral gauge, it started being a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is kind of something I got suckered into, because I love these kind of games, and I still do. I still enjoy it. And I look back at like Knights of the Old Republic,
Yeah.
or Mass Effect, where you can see on your gauges where you're at on your moral compass. And I thought that was super cool at the time. I was like, whoa, like look how mean I am.
Yeah.
Like my red gauge is full, and like it was cool. Like it made you want to be a dick.
Yeah. It was interesting because it gave you different abilities attached to that as well. Like specifically even in Knights of the Old Republic, right? Depending on the kind of alignment that you were falling into or the choices that you were making along the way, different force abilities became available to you, different costs became associated with those abilities. If you went like full like light side, those abilities became cheaper and easier for you to acquire, right? Because you
Yeah.
are actually fully good, or and vice versa for dark side as well. But like that's a very simple way of encompassing such a grand idea of morality and humanity, but it's done very well. I mean, it works really well for those games, and it definitely it's a system that has been well constructed and is simple enough to make it feel like you are making some sort of changes to the world around you,
Yeah.
but nothing like too grand or right. Like you're not going to change the ending of the game, kind of grand.
With Knights of the Old Republic, it was cool because, like you were saying, you unlocked things differently.
Hmm.
So it made you want to go those routes because your choices actually felt like they were doing something. And I mean, even Mass Effect had that too, where especially I think with 2 and 3, if you didn't have a high enough gauge on one of the two sides, dialogue would be cut off. And it would actually alter not the main ending of the story, but it would alter some of the events leading up to it.
Hmm.
And at the time, I thought it was cool. The problem with these moral gauges and the lockouts and stuff, it makes you really only play one side.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of games started doing that where you would just pick a side. Every time I play Mass Effect, and I played it multiple times, I would always do Renegade
Hmm.
because I thought being rude and being mean was like, I don't know, I thought it was funny.
Hmm.
When I played the Paragon, like the good one, your character ended up being more of a douche. And I was like, oh, his comments are kind of funny. Like, I kind of like this.
Right.
Like, it was actually kind of fun playing Paragon in a game because, like, you weren't this destructive person, but you were like a smartass. And I was like, oh, I like this. Like, it's cool.
Right.
And it made me want to start exploring games that had this. And the problem is, a lot of games that have this moral system or gauge just don't know how to implement it.
Hmm.
And I started going towards games that didn't have that visible gauge because I feel like when the gauge is visible, you get really suckered into sticking to one side.
Yeah.
And I think like the latest games that had kind of a decent one, or maybe the Fallout games,
Hmm.
at least 3 and New Vegas. 4 your choices didn't feel like they did anything.
Right.
But with 3, I'm just remembering right off the bat, it's like you have the option of blowing up this town, like setting off this nuke, uh, in order to get some extra money.
Hmm.
And it's like your moral choice wasn't right there in front of you. It's like, do I want to make that decision?
Right.
And I felt like those Fallout games had it where it felt like the old days, like with the alignment, like you weren't pressured into like a moral gauge. You're just, is this mean or is this gonna help me? Like you could easily make decisions, like good ones and bad ones,
Hmm.
without having to stay to one side.
Yeah.
And I like that. I wish more games had that instead of making it where you just have to be mean the whole way through.
No, yeah, I agree. And the cool thing with Fallout 3 as well was at the end of the game, they even had like a little slideshow that kind of
Mm-hmm.
showed off some of the choices that you had made throughout the game. So you
Oh, I love
you
that.
did feel like you actually made an impact on the world around you. And I can't agree more with the idea of when games lose that whole like symbol or the tracker of your good or bad decisions, then
Mm-hmm.
you start making more interesting decisions as a player. Because like I don't know, those games that where they have the two choices in front of you and one's red and one's blue, like Infamous, right? Like when you make a
Yeah.
choice, you see, okay, here's the bad one, here's the good one. What do I do? Right? That it would be more interesting to see those games without those color codings attached to them, and they might have been even more enjoyable for me at least, right? I'm sure they're really enjoyable for a lot of people, but for me, I feel like that kind of dumbed it down to like, oh, this is good and this is bad. Which one do you want to do? Right? Like it just wasn't it never felt like I had like a whole lot of meaning behind the choices that I made, because I'm just making, okay, well, like this one's red and I want red abilities, so I'm gonna go with red, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it would be a lot more interesting to see those games without that color code or without that indicator attached to them.
Exactly. It really does deadlock you into just staying with that color, you know? And I don't know. I feel like a lot of more modern games, especially indie games, have kind of changed
Yeah.
that recently. They don't make it so apparent anymore, which is cool. And it just now it's reminding me of like Fable and some other games where you can be evil the whole way through, but then you make one decision at the end and then you get the good ending.
Yeah, that always bugged me. That always bugged me.
I don't get it, like why they do that with games.
Yeah, I mean, they want to give you the opportunity to be the hero, but they only made one ending, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just that's the problem with it, where like, because Fable is a pretty long game, and you can do so much in Fable, where they give you the illusion of just changing the entire world and the face of the planet with your
Yeah.
decisions. But at the end, it boils down to, what was it? Take the sword or destroy the sword or something, right?
Something like
And
that.
if you destroy it, then you're a good guy, regardless of all the actions that you did before that. Like you could have been a murderer and stole from entire villages, and then you just go and do this one good act, and now all of a sudden all your sins are absolved, and you're good to go. You're a hero. Everybody loves you. So it's those are tough, and I mean, I get it. Morality is a hard thing to depict in games, and it's a lot of background work that players might not even see. So, what's the point of even developing it? But there's a lot of games out there that are expanding on the idea of the moral system and including these mechanics in there that are hidden from the player that they might ever see. And I feel like those are the ones that have the much more depth to them, and those are the, like, the memorable experience games, for sure.
In Fable's defense, it was kind of like the one of the first games to
That's
really
true.
implement
That
the
is true.
moral,
It
but
it definitely led the way for these other games in the future to expand on that idea. Hey, everybody, just jumping in real quick. Just want to say, first of all, thank you for continuing listening, and obviously you're enjoying it because you've reached the middle of our episode. But before we continue on, we just wanted to remind you all that if you are truly enjoying what you're hearing and you want to learn some more about us, you can find us on social medias, and we have links in our description. And you can find me and all the drawings that I'm doing on Instagram at Kieran, and that's Keuran. What about you, Chris?
you can find me at Sloppy Cube on Instagram. That's Sloppy and Cube at the end of it. I do all retro games or just games in general, so if that's your thing, check me out. You can also message me about ideas and anything because I love talking.
Yep. We both really enjoy talking, obviously, because we are recording a podcast. So if you want to join in the conversation, please reach out to us on the Discord, and let's get right back into this episode.
Before this, we were talking about Papers, Please, and I
Yeah.
thought it was really interesting that you had brought that up. And I think how I was saying, like how indie games kind of have changed the way it works. You brought up a really good subject on it.
Yeah, Papers, Please, I think, is a fantastic example of a morale system in gaming working right, where your decisions actually do impact the game. So, if you haven't played Papers, Please, you basically are what's it called? I can't even think of the name of the position or the occupation.
Oh, you're kind of like a border agent.
Okay, yeah.
Like you're checking the
Yeah.
passports.
So in Papers, Please, you're a border agent and you're checking the passports of the people coming in, and you are tasked with the job to make sure that only people who are allowed to cross the border can cross. And so you're going through all their paperwork, their passports, their birth certificates. You can even ask for fingerprints, and you're looking for discrepancies in their stories and their paperwork to determine if it's okay for them to pass through the border. Now, at the end of the day, you get a kind of a summary of everything that goes on, and you get paid for all the people that you successfully straight away from the border, and you get paid for the people who properly went across. But then you also see these things at the end of bills, and the bills are based on your family. So it's food for your family, the heating bill, medical bills, and things like that. Now, the thing that they set up in the game that's really genius is that if you only perform the job correctly, meaning that you listen to the rules of the government 100%, and you're only letting people who are like legitimate based on the government's decision through, you will never make enough money to make sure that your family is able to survive or even thrive. So
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of led into this to the shady side of things where you're letting certain people through that you probably shouldn't because your government's saying that they're not allowed to come in, just so that you can make ends meet to keep the heater on for your family or to make sure that they're getting food on a daily
Yeah.
basis. And what I love about this mechanic is that it's hidden in a sense where it's not really, I mean, it's out there for the player, you know what's going on, but it's not really pressured upon. You're not seeing like a gauge above your head saying like, "Oh, well, because you did the good thing for your government, now your family's dying." Right? Like it's one of those where you as a player start to come to the realization that if I don't do this, then my family's going to die. Now, what do I need to do to make sure that they survive? But I still need to keep this job because otherwise, then what's the point? Then that we're all gonna pass away, right? Like we're all not gonna be able to eat today. I'm not gonna be able to pay those medical bills. So you start trying to find ways to work around the system, and it's such a genius little mechanic. I love it.
Yeah, it's when you brought that up about how it's hidden, I was thinking like I've played the game. I think I've lasted maybe 4 or 5 days. I forget how many days I've made it, but you see the progression, right? So I mean, obviously the game tries to throw more difficulties at you. At first you're just checking for discrepancies on their passport.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like after that, they have to have a little like pass to like a little work visa. And then after that, it's like the fingerprint, all
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's like they keep adding to it. And you start getting these conversations with people like, hey, here's some extra money if you let me through,
Right.
And I mean, like the game is pretty good. It'll ding you if you fail to approve, like if you mess up someone's date, like you get a little like
Mm-hmm.
penalty. So you're always being watched. Like to people who don't know the setting for the game, just imagine like it's like Russia or one of those
Yeah.
countries there. So you're always under surveillance. And I think in the beginning I played really like goody goody. And yeah, like you said, like your family starts like you're screwed. You don't have enough money for your family. Like I was doing it where I think the first day or two, I put all my money towards food and none towards the heater. Well, of course, after that, one of them gets sick.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, now I'm really screwed because I have to pay for food, heat, and medicine. And that ended up sending me on a really bad downward spiral. So I restarted and I started playing the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with this game is that you can't really pick one full side and make it. Like you really have to jump between both, which is cool because it feels more
Yeah.
human
It's real. That's
that
a
you're
more of a real.
more,
Yeah.
and it's crazy. Like sometimes you'll let people in and like it'll have a big consequence, not just against like the government kind of, but it'll set off other things, right? So you can let over like a terrorist or something, and it's really interesting to see like your choices, how big they impact in the game. And it's a game you wouldn't expect it in either. That's what's so crazy about it. It's like this really, it's always super cheap. You can always buy it for like under $5
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. And it's a simple game, but it's complex, and I love the moral decisions in it because it feels
Yeah.
real.
No, that's definitely a great title for it.
I think another one we were talking about was Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, Darkest Dungeon's a really, really cool title. It's another one of those where it's a roguelike game where you're going through a dungeon. And after every run, you go back to your main town, your main hub. But the core of it is in the sanity and of your players or of your characters that you're recruiting to go through this dungeon. So as you go through, your players start to get more and more depressed or they start to kind of go insane. And one of the things you can actually do is turn off the lights, which lowers the player sanity because now they're going through a dungeon in complete darkness, which is terrifying
Oh,
for people, right? Like anyone would be terrified doing that when you know that there's monsters lurking around every corner. But what happens is when you return to town, there's certain things you can do to kind of help them deal with their day, how they're going to cope with the situations that they went through. You can send them to prayer, so you can go to the church and they can go the spiritual route, but that costs money and resources. Or you can have them just
lame.
right, or you can just have them drink, and they can right.
Yeah.
They drink the pain away in a sense, but that leads to more depression. And after a while, the costs outweigh the benefits of continuing with this certain character. So one of the options you can do is you can just basically say, you know what, like you're no longer working for like this party isn't working out. So you just disband whatever character is overly depressed or overly insane, and then you just get a new person to replace them because the people are free. So what's really interesting about this game is that it's kind of been equated as the CEO simulator game where you have an ultimate goal. You're trying to get, you're trying to gather enough resource or a bunch of resources. You're trying to become profitable in that sense, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
exploit the individuals around you to acquire these things, and basically stop. Like you listen to their needs to a certain extent, but then when the cost outweighs the benefit, then you look at it as a business standpoint and you replace them just like you would in a normal business situation, unfortunately, right? You would think that a lot of businesses would take care of their people because it's up to us to make sure their business continues. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people that want a job right now that if you if you make a fuss or you become too much of a liability, you're easily replaceable. And just like in Darkest Dungeon, that happens with all of the characters that you interact with. So it's really crazy where you, the player, start having to weigh these decisions. And it might not feel that way when you first play or like playing through it, because it didn't for me whenever I was playing through the game. But then
Yeah.
looking back at it, like retroactively, it, I was making some fucked up decisions and basically ruining people's lives so that I can continue getting newer and cooler relics from these dungeons. When really, it's not me going through those dungeons at all. I'm hiring these people to do it. And then I'm putting them through these difficult like situations and horrible situations where they have to like risk their lives on a daily basis just so I can get some new cool stuff. And then when
Damn, you're a dick.
right? Exactly. And then whenever they finally like are when they really need help the most, you just get a new person to replace them. It's horrible. But
It's like a real life
yeah,
simulation.
that is 100% real life, and I love that game for that because it's not thrown in the player's face. You're not being called a bad person for sending someone out to the street, but you as a player, like you feel that weight of trying to help these people. You hear them praying, like you hear them like you see them in the bars drinking away like every night before you send them out to somewhere else. Like it's a crazy idea and I love how they implemented that. So talking about like real life and moral systems, this is one of the games that I think does it very, very well is Darkest Dungeon. And actually, first time I played the game, it caught my eye because it's actually there's an artist on Instagram that I follow. Her name's Lady T, and it's LADY_TEA, and she does really really great
Mm-hmm.
artwork on there. You guys need to check it out. But she's the main artist for Darkest Dungeon, And the art style for Darkest Dungeon is completely different than what she normally does. As far as like her posts are always very like happy drawings and cutesy characters. And then seeing this, I was like, oh shit, like that's crazy. I want to check this out because seeing her range was really cool. And then come to find out that this game is actually like that kind of like dark and real and gritty and just real life. It's just made it that much more interesting to me.
Yeah, I never really put the picture together with that game because it was like I never looked at it as a standpoint like I'm like a manager for these people.
Mhm.
So when they would come back and they would be like scarred from traveling in the darkness, I'm like, yeah, they can go drink the night away.
Right? Like it's not one thing
And
that
then I
you
start
think about
drinking
it.
every
Yeah.
night. And then I get debuffs from it, and I'm like, oh my god, they're becoming alcoholics. Like, just throw them on the street and we'll get a new one.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll find someone that's going to travel on this thing in darkness and get me some goodies.
Yep.
Then they can just kick it on the street, you know? And it's like, damn, like, I'm actually kind of fucked up. And it's interesting. Like, I like when games do that where it's different,
Mhm.
right? Like, it ends up being like, do I want to be nice to them or do I not? And I mean, ultimately, like your choices like aren't really gonna mess up how you get to the end.
Mhm.
It's more so like, do I actually want to be mean for almost no apparent reason?
Right. Like the next time I
Because
play
either
that
way,
game,
you're gonna get the treasure.
exactly. The next time I play that game, I kind of want to play through where I try and keep my core 4 people.
Good luck. I think when I played, I was only in the end. I was able to keep, I think, 1.
Yeah, see, that's hard, but it's real. Like that's the crazy thing, and that's what like we mentioned it before. Like the idea of having a moral system in your face, like a dial or a gauge or a meter, takes away from these choices where the player isn't making as much of interesting decisions as they normally would have. Where with
Yeah.
Darkest Dungeon, it takes that out of the equation completely, where you don't know, like you as a player, you know what you're doing, but at the same time, your goal is like you're playing a game. But then looking back at it, it's like, well, I made some fucked up decisions here, right? Like I'm playing with people's lives. Yes, it's a game. I'm not trying to say like I'm not a crazy person where I think these people are really living, but it's
Yeah.
a good gauge to kind of keep that in your mind or in the back of your mind where like at least you know what you're doing. Know that your actions have consequences and these things are actually playing out in front of you and it could help you out in real world situations, right? Maybe give you a little like just help you have a little bit more empathy for that person around you, especially if you're in a management position.
Yeah, that server at your restaurant that you're managing is going home every night drinking their brains away just because you want them to bust tables in the dark. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
no, that's 100% true.
now I'm starting to think of games where you're an asshole, and I'm like thinking of like Postal 2. Did you ever play that
No,
game?
I never played that one.
Oh God. I remember a long time ago finding that game as a download, and I like downloaded it, and being able to pee on anything, I was like, oh, this is cool. It's so edgy. And then you're just peeing on people, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm an ass.
Yeah, but think about that. If you did that in real world, it's like, all right.
Oh God. You could piss on Gary Coleman.
Like that's insane.
And that's the other thing. There's like games where you just start out like chaotically evil, and I'm just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you ever heard of Hatred.
No.
It was super controversial because basically you're this like angsty dude. It's like black and white, but red is shown too for all the blood.
Okay.
And you just go on a murdering spree. Like you leave your house and you're breaking into people's houses, murdering them on their like living room. Like it was controversial because basically it's just a killing simulator.
Mm-hmm.
And it is messed up. I played a little bit of it and I was just like, okay, this is kind of just trying to be like evil for no reason.
See,
you know?
and that always bugs me. That's one thing too. I actually mentioned it as well to I just had a conversation about this yesterday with Matt from Matt Die Draws, and the prompt for the day was to create a villain. And in his little bio, the description on his post, he actually went into the backstory of the villain. And I had to commend him for it because he put like it, I don't like it whenever villains are just bad to be bad. That just doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense to me, right? There's life situations and choices that were made that led them to this point and got and kind of pushed them past the edge. And he
Right.
set up a really interesting, really dynamic situation where you could see someone like if I was put in his situation, I would be doing the same exact thing. And I would be considered a
Hmm.
villain amongst this other civilization, 100%, right? Because he's just doing it to try and protect his family. And that's like one of the biggest things that I love about certain games is that whenever, like, let's say the whole game you're fighting against this big bad and you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy's just a dick, right? But then at the end you find out, oh, like he was doing it to save his, sister who's dying or whatever it may be, right? Like the
Yeah.
those decisions, then it grounds the person because it's legit. Like, I mean, the Joker movie, right? I That movie terrifies me because I can see that happening. And that's what I really enjoyed about it is that that person walking next to you on the sidewalk could be in that exact mental state and you would never know. And that's what makes it
Oh yeah.
real. Like that's what I loved about it. So when you were able to convey like why someone's being bad or really put them in a situation to do something genuinely like or not genuinely evil, but like quote unquote bad, like in Papers, Please, where you're just trying to keep the lights on, or in Darkest Dungeon, where like you're just making these fucked up decisions because you want to make sure that you're profitable, right? Like at least it's known to the player and it's out there where like you feel the weight of those decisions and you see the consequences. All right, so that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening, and if you like what you heard, join the conversation with us, join the Discord. We definitely want to talk more about these subjects because it's always on our minds, that's for sure. And we both love going more into the details of like the more philosophical side of these things. So, yeah, just chat with us. Let's build up this community together. All right. Well, thank you once again for listening. And bye.
Bye.